pay me $3,000 every month, I choose divorce.
Wait, you'll regret this.
No, Daniel, you will, when everyone discovers what you and your mother secretly did with my money.
The night I became a director, my mother-in-law raised her glass, smiled at me, and said, "Starting next month, you will pay me $3,000, or you will divorce my son." I looked at my husband, waiting for him to laugh. He did not. So I put down my champagne and said, "Then I choose divorce." Hello, my name is Claire Morgan. I am 38 years old, and until that night, I believed I had spent 11 years building a marriage with a kind, dependable man. I was wrong. I had spent 11 years financing a family that had been quietly measuring my value in dollars. This is the story of how one demand for money destroyed my marriage, uncovered a secret account, and taught my husband's family that the quiet woman at the dinner table had been paying attention all along. I met Daniel when I was 25. We worked in the same office building in Chicago, although not for the same company. He was a junior architect. I was an assistant account manager at a logistics firm. We first spoke when the elevator stopped between floors for 12 minutes. Daniel made jokes to keep everyone calm. I noticed that he gave his bottle of water to an older woman who looked faint. By the time the doors opened, he had made me laugh 3 times. We started dating 2 weeks later. Daniel's mother, Evelyn, did not like me from the beginning. She was always polite, but her politeness felt like a white glove checking furniture for dust. At our first dinner, she asked what my parents did. When I told her my father had been a mechanic and my mother worked in a public library, she smiled and said, "How wonderfully ordinary." Daniel squeezed my hand under the table. Later, he apologized for her. "She is old-fashioned," he said. "Do not take it personally." That sentence became the background music of our marriage. When Evelyn criticized our apartment, she was old-fashioned. When she opened our kitchen cabinets without asking, she was old-fashioned. When she told me I should put my career aside before Daniel became embarrassed by my ambition, she was old-fashioned. And whenever I complained, Daniel would kiss my forehead and ask me to be patient. For years, I was. Daniel's architecture career moved slowly. Mine did not. I loved solving problems, and I was good at remaining calm when everyone else panicked. I became a team leader, then a regional manager, then vice president of operations. With every promotion, Evelyn's attitude changed in a strange way. She respected me less as a person, but expected more from my bank account. It began with small things. Could I pay for her birthday dinner because Daniel was between projects? Could I cover a new refrigerator because hers made a noise? Could we take her to Florida for Christmas because she had always dreamed of seeing the ocean in winter? I paid because I could. More importantly, I paid because Daniel made every request sound temporary. "Mom sacrificed everything for me," he would say. "I just want to give something back." What he meant was that he wanted me to give it back for him. Still, I loved him. I did not keep score. That was my first mistake. My second mistake was believing that love and transparency were the same thing. 3 months before my promotion to director, I noticed something unusual. Daniel had become protective of his phone. He carried it from room to room. If it buzzed while we were watching television, he turned the screen away. I asked whether something was wrong. "Work stress," he said. Then I found a bank statement in the recycling bin. It was addressed to Daniel, but the account was unfamiliar. The balance was a little over $42,000. I stood in the kitchen holding that paper, trying to make sense of it. We had joint checking and savings accounts. We had agreed to discuss every separate account and every purchase over $1,000. I did not confront him immediately. I wanted facts, not an argument. The next morning, I photographed the statement and put it back exactly where I had found it. Then I checked our household records. For almost 4 years, money had been leaving our joint account in amounts small enough to avoid my attention. $800, $1,200, $950. The transfers were labeled with harmless words such as insurance, repairs, or consulting. Together, they totaled more than $76,000. The destination account belonged to a small company called Bellwether Design Services. Daniel had never mentioned it. I searched the Illinois Business Registry. Bellwether had been created by Evelyn Morgan. Daniel was listed as the company secretary. There was no website, no office, and no evidence that it had ever served a client. That was the first moment I understood that the problem was not just Evelyn's greed. My husband was involved. I printed every record I could legally access and stored the copies in a locked drawer at work. Then I changed the passwords on my personal accounts and reviewed my credit report. I found a credit inquiry for a business loan I had never requested. The application had been denied because the signature did not match. My hands became cold as I read the notification. Someone had tried to use my income to borrow $200,000. That evening, Daniel cooked pasta and asked how my day had been. He smiled as if nothing had happened. I wanted to throw the papers on the table and demand the truth. Instead, I watched him sprinkle cheese onto my plate. "Busy," I said. "The board makes its final decision next Friday." He brightened instantly. The director position came with a significant salary increase, stock options, and a performance bonus. Daniel knew all of that. "You are going to get it," he said. "When you do, everything will change." He was right, although not in the way he expected. The following week, my company announced my promotion. My colleagues surprised me with flowers, and my chief executive handed me a framed letter from the board. I called my parents first. My mother cried. My father said he had known since I was 10 years old that I would run something important one day. Then I called Daniel. He congratulated me and said Evelyn wanted to host a family dinner that Saturday. I nearly refused. But some quiet instinct told me to go. I believed the dinner revealed what Daniel and his mother were planning. So I put the bank documents in my car, dressed in a dark blue suit, and arrived at Evelyn's house at 7. Her dining room looked like a private club. She had used her best china and placed gold candles along the table. Daniel's sister, Melissa, was there with her husband. Evelyn had even ordered a cake with the words, "Congratulations, Diartarci" written in silver icing. For the first hour, everyone was unusually kind. Then Evelyn stood and raised her glass. "To Claire," she said. "May her success finally bring security to the whole family." The word finally bothered me. After dessert, she placed a folder beside my plate. Inside was a typed agreement. It stated that, beginning on the first day of the next month, I would transfer $3,000 to Evelyn every month. The payments would continue indefinitely. They were described as a family support obligation. I read the page twice. "What is this?" I asked. Evelyn folded her hands. "It is very simple. I invested my life in raising Daniel. Now that you are earning an executive salary, it is appropriate for you to provide for me." I looked at Daniel. "Did you know about this?" He stared at his plate. That silence answered me. Evelyn continued. "3,000 is modest for someone in your position. If you refuse, then you clearly do not respect this family. In that case, you should divorce my son and stop wasting his time." Melissa whispered, "Mom, maybe this is too direct." But Evelyn lifted one finger and silenced her. Daniel finally spoke. "Claire, let us not make this dramatic. Mom needs stability. We can afford it." "We?" I asked. "You know what I mean." I looked around the table. No one appeared surprised. They had discussed this before I arrived. The dinner was not a celebration. It was an ambush. Something inside me became perfectly still. I set the agreement on the table. "Then I choose divorce," I said. Daniel laughed nervously. "Claire, stop. I am not joking." Evelyn's smile disappeared. She had expected anger, tears, or negotiation. She had not expected agreement. "You would throw away 11 years over $3,000?" she asked. "No," I said. "Your son threw away 11 years before I walked into this room." I stood, took my coat, and left. Daniel followed me into the driveway. "You are embarrassing me," he hissed. "That is what concerns you." "Mom pushed too hard. I will speak to her. We can reduce the amount." That sentence ended any doubt I still had. He was negotiating the price of my obedience, not defending our marriage. I drove to a hotel and called an attorney named Rachel Kim, whom a colleague had recommended. By 9 the next morning, we were sitting in her office. I showed her the business records, the transfers, and the loan inquiry. Rachel read everything without interrupting. When she finished, she said, "Do not go home alone. Do not access his private devices. Do not move joint funds without legal advice. We will proceed carefully." She helped me document my personal property and file for divorce. We also notified the bank about the suspicious credit application. That afternoon, Daniel sent me 23 messages. The first 5 were apologetic. The next 6 blamed Evelyn. Then he accused me of being cold, selfish, and obsessed with money. Finally, he threatened to tell my company that I had abandoned him after using his emotional support to build my career. I saved every message. 3 days later, I returned to the house with my attorney's approved plan and 2 witnesses. Daniel was gone. I collected my clothes, personal papers, family photographs, and the blue ceramic bowl my mother had made for me. As I packed, I noticed that a framed photograph was missing from Daniel's desk. Behind it was a small key taped to the wood. I did not take it. I photographed it and told Rachel. During the legal discovery process, that key became important. It opened a safe deposit box rented in the name of Bellwether Design Services. Inside were contracts, account records, and a notebook written in Evelyn's careful handwriting. The notebook listed payments from me as if they were business revenue. It also contained plans for a property purchase in Wisconsin. Evelyn and Daniel intended to buy a lakeside house. The loan application using my information had been part of that plan. They expected my promotion to make the next application easier. The $3,000 monthly agreement was meant to create a clean-looking stream of income for Evelyn. helping her qualify for financing. They did not want retirement support. They wanted me to fund their vacation home. When Rachel explained what the documents showed, I felt strangely calm. The mystery was over. In its place was something clearer and more painful: the truth. Daniel had spent years telling me he hated financial conflict. In reality, he avoided conflict with his mother by quietly giving her my money. When that was not enough, he helped her use my identity. The divorce became ugly very quickly. Daniel claimed the transfers were gifts I had approved. Evelyn said Bellwether was a legitimate consulting company, and that I had benefited from its advice. Neither explanation survived contact with the records. Bellwether had no clients, invoices, payroll, or business expenses. It had only deposits from our joint account and withdrawals used for Evelyn's personal bills. Then another surprise arrived. Melissa called me late one night. "I need to tell you something," she said. She admitted that Evelyn had demanded money from her too. For years, Melissa and her husband had paid $500 a month because Evelyn threatened to exclude them from family events and change her will. "Why did you not say anything at the dinner?" I asked. Melissa began to cry. "Because when she attacked you, I was relieved it was not me." Her honesty hurt, but I understood it. Fear can make decent people silent. Melissa gave Rachel copies of messages in which Evelyn described my promotion as the solution to all our problems. In another message, Daniel wrote, "Wants clear signs. We can show the bank's stable monthly revenue." That message changed everything. Daniel had not merely tolerated his mother's demand. He had helped design it. At mediation, he looked smaller than I remembered. He asked to speak to me privately, but Rachel refused. He sat across the table and told me he still loved me. "I made a mistake," he said. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary." I replied, "You created a company with your mother, took money from our account for 4 years, and tried to use my identity for a loan. That is a system." He lowered his voice. "If this becomes public, it will destroy my career. You were willing to damage my credit, my career, and my future." Mom pressured me. "You are 40 years old, Daniel." He had no answer. The financial evidence gave me a strong position. On Rachel's advice, I did not seek to punish him beyond what the law allowed. I asked for the return of my share of the money, removed from our accounts, protection from the fraudulent debt, and a fair division of property. Daniel resisted until the bank's fraud department completed its review. Then his attorney suddenly became eager to settle. The final agreement required him to repay me for the unauthorized transfers from marital funds. I kept my retirement account, my stock options, and my professional bonuses. Daniel kept his architecture practice, along with responsibility for the debts connected to Bellwether. The attempted loan was canceled. My credit was protected. The documents were referred to the appropriate investigators, and Bellwether was dissolved. The lakeside house disappeared from Evelyn's future. But justice did not arrive with dramatic music. It arrived as signatures on ordinary white paper. The real revenge came later. 6 months after the divorce, my company opened a new regional office. As director, I led the project. We finished ahead of schedule and under budget. At the opening ceremony, the chief executive announced that I would also oversee our expansion into 2 additional states. My parents stood in the front row. My father wore the same dark suit he had worn at my wedding, although my mother had to pin the waist because he had lost weight. When I finished my speech, they hugged me as if I had won an Olympic medal. That evening, I received an email from Evelyn. The subject line said, "Famille Soul de Far." She wrote that Daniel was struggling. His largest client had left after learning he had mixed personal finances with a false business. She had been forced to sell her house because she could no longer afford the mortgage. She said she hoped I was satisfied. At the bottom, she added one final sentence. "If you had simply paid the $3,000, none of this would have happened." I read the email twice. Then I wrote back, "You are right about one thing. None of this would have happened if I had paid. You would have received the money, Daniel would have kept lying, and I would still be financing people who saw my love as a weakness. I am very grateful that you gave me a choice." I did not send anything cruel. I did not insult her. I did not mention the house she had lost. I simply attached the signed divorce decree and wrote one final line I chose correctly. Then I blocked her address. A year passed. My life became quieter. At first, the quiet frightened me. I had grown used to Daniel's emergencies, Evelyn's demands, and the constant pressure to prove that I was generous enough to deserve a place in their family. Without that noise, I had to learn who I was when no one was taking from me. I started visiting my parents more often. I traveled to Santa Fe with 2 friends from college. I bought a small house with large windows and turned one room into a library for my mother. I even took a pottery class, although every bowl I made leaned slightly to the left. One Saturday, Melissa came to see me. She had stopped paying Evelyn. She and her husband had started counseling, and she was learning to set boundaries. You changed the whole family, she said. I shook my head. No. Your mother gave all of us the same choice. I was simply the first person to answer honestly. Before she left, Melissa asked whether I regretted ending the marriage so quickly. I thought about the question. From the outside, my decision had looked sudden. One moment I was celebrating a promotion, the next, I was choosing divorce. But the truth was that my marriage had not ended at that dinner table. It had ended in hundreds of smaller moments, every time Daniel asked me to ignore disrespect, every time he called manipulation tradition, every time he moved money, and trusted my love to keep me from looking closely. The ultimatum did not destroy our marriage. It turned on the light. Today, I am an executive vice president. The promotion is important, but it is not the achievement I value most. My greatest achievement was learning that success means nothing if you surrender yourself to keep other people comfortable. Evelyn believed my new title made me valuable enough to charge. Daniel believed my love made me easy to control. They both misunderstood me. I was not walking away from a family over $3,000. I was walking away from a life in which my dignity had a monthly price. And if someone ever forces you to choose between their control and your freedom, remember this. The most expensive decision is not always the one that costs you money. Sometimes it is the one that costs you yourself. I chose divorce. But what I really chose was me.